Lovely. All right. I'm so excited to be here and honored to be here with Kiley King. We connected at the sort of brainstorming session of the LLS Visionary campaign. And as I told him, and I just reiterated to him before we started recording, his was the most powerful part of it because it reminds us that there are humans in front of the diagnosis, in front of the fundraising, in front of everything that we're doing. And I think it's always important to come back to that. So thank you for coming here today, Kiley.
Yes, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's just start off with a little bit about you, the things that you enjoy. What do you do for work? I just kind of want to know who you are first, and then we'll kind of get into your journey.
Sure, sure. Yeah, am originally from the Midwest. I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and eventually made it my way to Florida. Just wanted to get away from the cold weather. So made it here in 2016. I have a wife and two daughters, 13 and 12. What I like to do in my free time is spend time with family, golf, things like that. Try to stay active as much as possible. So
Lovely.
as far as my profession, I've been in the mortgage and real estate business for probably about 25 years now.
Wow, you
Yeah.
are definitely a veteran in that space. So
Yes.
yeah, if anybody listening needs some
Yeah.
help, Kylie's your guy.
There you
I
go.
didn't know you were that. I saw your email, and I knew that that's what you did, but I
Yeah.
hadn't heard it from you. So
Yeah.
well, amazing. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you have found your way to Florida, so that we have now become
Yeah.
friends. But I
Yes.
also love that you're from the Midwest, and I don't know a whole ton of people from the Midwest, so
Yeah.
lovely that you're here, and thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. So
Absolutely.
let's get a little bit into your journey. So take us through sort of, when did things start to show up as maybe there's a health concern, and then what did the diagnosis look like?
Yeah. So in the middle of 2021, I had had COVID, and a couple months after that, not a couple months after, but shortly after that, I started experiencing back pain. So I was taking Advil, things like that, and people were telling me that, it's a symptom of COVID. I had back pain after I had COVID, all that type of stuff. So I kind of let it go, but the pain started getting worse and worse to the point where um, Advil wasn't working. I couldn't sleep. I was miserable like 24/7. And I finally told my wife on a Saturday morning that, I can't take it anymore. I have to go to the urgent care. And I was simply going there just to see if they could give me something more powerful for the pain, because in my mind, it was still a side effect of COVID. Um, so I go in, and the doctor there said, this doesn't feel right to me. I think you should go to the ER. So I go to the ER and ultimately get scanned. Still in pain. I'm still hoping for something a little bit stronger to get rid of the pain. And the ER doctor came in and asked me if some of my symptoms and so forth. And he's like, you know, I can't diagnose you here, but it appears from what I see, I guess my lymph nodes were extremely enlarged, that, I can't rule out that you have a cancer. Um, and of course, I didn't really, I dismissed it. I didn't really believe him. I'm 46 at the time, relatively healthy, do like I live a healthy lifestyle, etc. Um, so I came home, and, he said, you need to schedule an appointment with your family doctor. I eventually get in there on Monday or Tuesday. And that's kind of when it hit, when she saw the scans and said, listen, it appears you have a lymphoma. Um, and again, my mind initially went, you're wrong. I know more than you, type thing. This is just a symptom of COVID. And ultimately got into Moffitt and was officially diagnosed with anaplastic large cell lymphoma, um, which when I initially went in, the oncologist said, listen, until we get the biopsy done, et cetera, I'm not going to diagnose you, but if I were to guess, I would say you have a B cell lymphoma, which is a more common type of lymphoma. So when I got the official diagnosis, his initial words were, I'm shocked, which I didn't feel very good about.
Hmm.
But he said, you have anaplastic large cell lymphoma, which is a T cell lymphoma. And then I started the process from there with the chemotherapy, and started that whole journey.
Hmm. Yeah, it definitely takes me back to my dad's diagnosis. The good news on your end was that the initial ER doctor actually took it serious, or the initial urgent care doctor Was it urgent care sent you to the ER?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a very dismissive journey where it's like, oh, it took me 6 months for anybody to care enough to do the scan, to do the blood
Yeah.
work. So, definitely grateful to that initial physician, just hearing that. And that's not always the case, unfortunately, but it certainly did lead you into this tumultuous journey. And I had similar experience where I was like, there's no way you have somebody else's scan. Like this doesn't
Right.
happen,
Right.
like this, how does this happen to somebody who otherwise feels good? It's just this one pain.
Right.
So I definitely, get chills thinking about the parallels on this journey. How was this sort of received, or how did your family, or how was your family with you during the diagnostic process? Did you have to tell them in a different way? How was that?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty private person and I don't want to worry anybody, especially when it comes to me. So, my kids, we didn't tell till later on. And they were, a little bit younger. They're 13 and 12 now, so 3 years, so the understanding is kind of a little bit different at that age. And then my wife, I didn't really want to worry her either. So and my friends and family, I just wanted to really keep it to myself until I had that official diagnosis. And even then, I really didn't want to share it. But at the same time, I felt, if somebody can be shocked by my diagnosis and maybe go in and get checked, who normally wouldn't get checked for cancer or anything like that, that was my purpose behind, sharing it with friends and family.
Mm, yeah, I love that. I find so many, even of the people that I help, eventually want to get to the point where like, okay, how can I support others? And I love that that happened kind of like so early for you. This
Yeah.
awareness of keeping this in isn't serving anybody else, and so that's a very telling part of your journey and tells how amazing you are as a person. Um, so you're at Moffitt, which I hear only, and we talked to after the event
Yep.
that I mentioned, really great things about Moffitt.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your journey and experience there with the treatment process.
Yeah, so I think I told, once I started mentioning it to people that I was diagnosed with cancer, you get a lot of people that want to give you their opinion or say, hey, you need to go to this facility. So I kept hearing MD Anderson. And so a lot of people were saying MD Anderson, then there was another one in the East Coast somewhere. But when I did my research, I noticed that a lot of the staff there and even the CEO was from MD Anderson. So when I went in there and I actually met with the oncologist, I just had a good feeling about the people there, and I knew they cared. And I just felt comfortable there. I wanted to be close to home, going through the chemotherapy and all that stuff. So everybody there was fantastic. And when you're in these places, there's so many people in there. It's nerve wracking, because you see so many unfortunately sick people. But everything ran smoothly. You go in and you have maybe 3 or 4 appointments during the day. Very rarely were those appointments delayed. Um, Everybody was friendly, and upbeat. So I'm glad that I started and finished my therapy, there, and it ended up working out for me because I'm in remission now. So
Amazing, amazing. And I think that's a testament to people who work there really having a passion for this and it not feeling like a job, because I think working in this field can, I'm sure, take its toll from an emotional standpoint. It can
yeah.
it can be very emotional for everybody involved, and most of the time people who are doing this are doing it for just amazingly deep reasons. And so I love that that was your experience and that it was a positive experience despite the quantity of people. You didn't feel like you were just a part of a mass number of people. You felt tended to, and I think that's amazing. What was the duration of your treatment, and how did you tolerate what was offered to you?
So the duration was, I believe I started in like in November and my last chemo session was in April. I think it was every 3 or 4 weeks. So the initial session, wasn't horrible, but it progressively got worse. So, lost my hair, um, difficult to eat, things like that. Like it was hard for me to open the refrigerator. I couldn't, find my appetite, things like that. And then just the exhaustion and the energy levels just unfortunately weren't there. And that was, I think the hardest part for me was just not feeling strong physically. Um,
Mhm.
but as far as like nausea and stuff like that, I felt it. The good thing is I never succumbed to that because they load you with nausea medication while you're there during the sessions, and then they say stay ahead of that. So I made a conscious effort to stay ahead of that and take the medication I had for that. But overall, it was tough. I think it was tough also because it was during a time of COVID. So they kind of scared you, said you need to stay away from people. You cannot get sick while your immune system is broken down like this. So I didn't feel like a father either because, the kids were in school and yet they really were restricted from me. My wife was very conscious about me getting sick and me being around the girls and things like that. So it was really, it felt secluded and lonely actually
Mm.
during the process, especially because it was like a COVID issue also.
Absolutely. Yes. So many stories coming from COVID like this of just our and it just highlights our need to be connected to people and what happens when we're not. And of course when there's fear involved of like getting sick, and this is actually beyond just I might catch COVID, like this might actually be a problem for me because my immune system is depressed and suppressed with the meds. I can imagine that was really difficult. And what would you say were some of your more surprising pieces, whether it was emotionally or spiritually or physically? Like looking back now, just not having had a diagnosis of cancer before, not knowing what this looks like. And does anything come up as like, wow, that was really not expected, or I didn't think I would come out with this sort of aha moment or shift
Yeah.
in life perspective or that type of a thing?
Oh gosh, there's so many, and we could probably spend a whole nother half hour on that. But I think going through it spiritually, I it's weird. Like I was so connected with the people around me. Like, when you're diagnosed with something like this, you realize how, the everyday stressors are meaningless, right? And your mind can wander, your mind can be stressed on something at work that's really, in the grand scheme of things, really insignificant. None of those things were in my mind. You know what I mean? I was completely focused on if it was time for me and I had whatever time I had, I was completely focused on my family. I was completely in tune with
Mhm.
what was going on in their lives or if the conversations we had with friends and family. There was no other distractions in my mind other than, having that moment with my loved one or whoever it might be. So spiritually, that was it. But then also, when people would say they would pray for you, in a sense, I felt that energy.
Mm.
There was energy that I was feeling from, you know, a good friend who sent a nice note, or I'm praying for you, or we're at church and we said a prayer. Those things. You feel them. Like I actually felt them to my core, which was really something I've never felt before. So that's kind of, some of the things that stand out through my journey. I've tried to carry that on
Mm.
now afterwards also because, things like this can just happen and, you know, worrying about the everyday little things, even though you still do it, it's less important to me.
Mm. That's really powerful. Um, I think that we all could use perspective shifts around stressing about the minutia of our lives, the everyday little things that ultimately don't add up to much, worrying about things that never will ever transpire. Um, and so I imagine that you kind of become in a state of like, let me get back to that mindset of let me focus on hyper focus on what's important, and really beautiful, and just highlighting what may seem to somebody as, an everyday passing statement of I'm praying for you, but the impact that it had on you. I remember when, also something maybe relatively insignificant to most, when a friend of mine just called me when my dad was sick and said, I'm ordering subs for you. What type of subs do you want? Where it's like, I don't have to say anything to anybody and she's already going to do it. I don't have to
Yep.
say, don't worry about it. I'm fine, like, oh, okay, just turkey, but it was like, such a huge deal to me that it just arrived and I didn't have to think about it.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, were there other examples like that? I think a lot of people who maybe haven't been in a position to support somebody, an immediate family member, or didn't know how to support a friend or family member, I think it's helpful for them to know what has been helpful for other people,
Yep.
whether it's the statement like "I'm going to pray for you" and the action of actually praying and you feeling that,
Yep.
or somebody sending subs. Were any other examples of things that people said or did that were helpful for you?
You know, it's interesting because it's an odd situation for a lot of people. Even though cancer has affected most people personally one way or another, it's still uncomfortable um, for people to say. So I just the fact that I knew they were there,
Mhm.
supporting, sending energy, that type of stuff, I think was the most important thing to know because there's no right or wrong. There's no right thing to say. There's no right or wrong thing to do. I just think it's just knowing that somebody's there for support.
Mm.
So I think I don't know if I mentioned this on the call, or I'm sorry, in when we met. But my uncle, who's a fantastic person, and I love him to death, and he's been a big part of my life. He lives in Green Bay, but he was here on a sabbatical, and this was during the time. And he came over for Thanksgiving, and I'd never told this to him, but he said, Kiley, and this was after I've done a lot of research, right? I know you have like a 50% survival rate of this. And in my mind, I had a 70% survival based on
Mm.
what I was seeing. So it ruined my day. But I'm like, you just decreased my chances of living by 20% by making that comment. I could have gotten, you know what I'm saying? But
Mhm.
I looked beyond that, and he was there to support me, to give me to support. Although that comment maybe didn't do it at the time, I was able to look beyond that and say he's here, he loves me, he wants to see me do well, that type of stuff. So I just bring that up because even though that maybe he could have said it differently or not brought that statistic up, it's he was still there to support and love. So it was okay.
Mm. I love that you shared that because I do think a lot of people avoid because they feel like they're going to say something wrong and it's going to
Yeah.
make things worse. And so I think that's a really powerful example of how you've given them grace that okay, maybe they didn't know that how that landed with me, but I can see past that. And I think it gives people an more open door to
Yeah.
like just be here. It's okay. It's okay if you say something wrong. People are going to say
Right.
something that maybe doesn't, and wrong, like you said, is very, a fluid perspective because what's wrong
Yeah.
for somebody may not be wrong for the next person.
Exactly. Exactly.
So I love that you shared that
Yeah.
story. So what is your connect? So how did you get connected to LLS, so Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and what was sort of that journey? Did you utilize any of their resources during your treatment, and how did you get connected with them?
Yeah. So when I was diagnosed, there was this big gap between, my family doctor saying, you have cancer from when I got my official diagnosis, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It was a while. It was too long. And your world kind of shrinks. So for me, I just was thirsting for knowledge, for stories of people who survived, cancer, even though I didn't even know what type I had. So I turned to Google, which is the worst possible thing I could have done. I mean, I think I read every article you could possibly read, and I didn't even realize I was reading data from years ago. You could find really awful stories about lymphoma, things like that. So it wasn't until I was in the oncologist's office for some meeting, and I was given this booklet from LLS. And it was really a savior because all the everything you needed was right there. Um, Even if it was spousal support, there's stuff in there for my wife. There was um, updated information about therapies, chemotherapies, things like that. So everything was in every place. Everything I was looking for was in that one place. Um, do you use it all? No, but there's something in there for everybody going through this, this type of cancer. So for me, it was a savior because I was able to stop. I was able to get real information, and I was able to see what type of support there was out there. And also, it's the first time I didn't feel alone. You kind of feel like, oh my God, I feel like I'm the only one that has cancer in the whole world. And you start to realize that there are people who made it through and are thriving on the other side of this. So that was, one of the biggest things for me, finding the organization. Then, of course, I've started volunteering after.
Wow, really powerful. What stood out for me, it was the first time you didn't feel alone. Um, and yeah, really powerful because a lot of people, I think just a human nature, we go down the rabbit hole of Google because that's the search engine we know. I don't know, maybe in the future people will go to ChatGPT or whatever the new
Yeah,
Google
yeah,
is.
yeah, right.
But regardless, it's, the collection of information that isn't always helpful. So I think it's really powerful for you to say what the information from LLS did for you from, an emotional standpoint of feeling that
Yeah,
you're not alone, giving, it's credible information. You don't have to worry about, well, this sounds terrible, but should I believe this?
yeah,
And then just the fear that comes from that. And of course, we know physiologically staying in a state of fear certainly isn't helping your body. So you just
yeah,
kind of get into this really unhelpful spiral. And so I love that you found LLS to be a source of helpful information, a source of peace, a source of companionship. So that's really beautiful. And that you ended up volunteering. And I certainly appreciate you sharing your story both on here and at the event we were at. And I'm sure you'll be continuing to share that in future places there. And it's this is a lot of what inspired me to do this, is to
yeah,
highlight the humans in front of the diagnosis, because people can resonate with the human and their story way more than
yeah,
they can with with some stats and figures. Some people are very stats and figures oriented, but I think the stories are what really
yeah.
brings it home.
Well, what's interesting about that though, is for me, it's not about highlighting me. It's actually about highlighting people like you. Really, to be quite honest, because if it wasn't the kindness, you're doing this out of the kindness of your heart, right? I mean, I think I mentioned at that conference that 99% of the people who go through this don't know what you do and what you're doing right now. So just that kindness and genuine authenticity really touches my heart when I meet people like you and everybody else who volunteers at that organization. So
Yeah, and that's really beautiful. And I definitely appreciated that you said that there. And I think it's a reminder too for all of us that there still is goodness in humanity, regardless of what the news shows us and
right.
the radio tells us, and social media highlights that. Like just at the core, people are mostly good, good
Yeah.
humans, and
Yeah.
we forget that. So thank you for highlighting that, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
We never know what one word we say, one string of words we say are going to hit somebody in just the right way and guide them towards the next thing that they need. So I appreciate that, your selflessness in doing that, and in not, keeping all of it to yourself out of fear, but no, how can I help others? So
Yeah.
thank you for that, and thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your story.
Absolutely. No problem.